one of the co-chairs. We have a new co-chair today who's going to introduce herself in a minute. We are the Connecticut Advisory Council for Victims of Crime. This is our Tuesday, September 28th meeting. We are being recorded, so be mindful of that for whatever purposes that might mean to you. And we're going to run an agenda. We have 3 new people who have come on to the council. This is their first meeting, so I thought we'd start with introducing them. I will introduce myself, and then I will go to those 3 people, and then we'll go around the circle and introduce everyone else. Okay, so I'm Susan O'Million. I'm an attorney. I'm a survivor of homicide. I currently work with women who've come through domestic violence and sexual assault, helping them move from victim to survivor to thriver. And I've been on this council for a number of years, so it's great to be here, even though we're virtual, and it's great to have some new members. So I'm going to have people who are new today to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Judge Baldini, who's our new co-chair, and go for it.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laura Baldini. I've been a judge for over 11 years. I presently sit in the New Britain Judicial District. I recently was in the Hartford Judicial District for 5 years, working in Part A. I had the pleasure of working with Gail Hardy when I was in Hartford. I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you. Working on this council. I know that there's a lot of work to be done. I've had some meetings already with Susan and Linda, which have provided a lot of insight. So I look forward to working with all of you.
Great. And then Michelle Lettieri, Michelle Lettieri is a guest, but why don't you introduce yourself, Michelle, filling in for Bob at MAD.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
I am filling in for Bob today. I'm Michelle Lettieri. I've been with Mothers Against Drunk Driving for over 26 years. I am a victim as well, and I've been on these calls before. Thank you for allowing me to come on, and hello to everybody that I know out there.
Great, thank you. And then Mark Pelto from OPM. Go ahead, Mark.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I am so thrilled to be part of this advisory committee. Thank you very much for letting me join as an executive branch representative. I am so grateful for this appointment. And I work at the Office of Policy and Management as Undersecretary of Criminal Justice Policy and Planning. Before this position, I worked at a national nonprofit organization called the Council of State Governments Justice Center, and we worked intensively in states, analyzing data, engaging stakeholders, developing policies to improve better outcomes. And through that work, I think one of the highlights of the experience was engaging victims and survivors and their advocates in the states. And an issue that came to the fore in our work was victim restitution. And I worked closely with advocates in Hawaii on strategies to improve the management of victim restitution orders. And we applied in our assistance data analysis to follow restitution orders through the criminal justice system and suggest ways to reduce the friction and to improve the management of those orders. At OPM, Criminal Justice Policy and Planning, we work on a range of priorities, including policy development and implementation, grant administration, and we are so proud to be the administrators of the VAWA grant, STOP and SASP. And we have a research unit that conducts monthly, annual, and other ad hoc analyses. And we've thoroughly enjoyed engaging victim service organizations to learn about their efforts to increase data collection and analysis and to seek ways we can incorporate their work into reports that we produce or support their efforts to add quantitative information to identify the needs of victims and survivors in our state. And finally, we convene stakeholders at the Criminal Justice Policy Advisory Committee. We're thrilled to have the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Alliance to End Sexual Violence, the Office of Victim Advocate, all participating and leading discussions around victims' issues. In my personal life, I'm a state certified sexual assault crisis counselor and volunteer. I'm thrilled to volunteer for my local territory at the YWCA of New Britain, where it's an honor to be given the privilege to assist survivors who contact the hotline or other means, and to learn about their needs and how I can support them in that capacity. So thank you again so much for the appointment. I'm thrilled to be with you. Look forward to the work that lies ahead.
Well, thank you, Mark. That was a stunning resume there, particularly at the end. I have to say, I've been doing this work for about 40 years, and I've met very few male victim advocates of sexual assault. So that's very admirable. Thank you for that important work. All right, and welcome to the team here, the Microsoft Teams, as they say. All right, and the last new person, I think she's on the phone, Amy Dupolo. Napoli? I'm gonna mess that name.
I'm here.
Go ahead, Amy. Yeah, go for it.
Hi, my name is Amy It's Lupoli, the fancy word.
Lupoli. Oh, that's even a better way to say it.
It's always like that. It's okay. I'm the Senior Director of Clinical Service at Klingberg Family Centers. Klingberg Family Centers oversees our CAC that's located in Hartford, so the KCAC. That's one of the programs that I oversee, as well as the advocates in the program, the mental health services that we provide our children who have been victims of crime in our CACS program, as well as in our outpatient programs and throughout the agency. I've been with Klingberg for about 2 years now. Prior to that, I worked in the New Haven district for about 17 years. And while I was working there as a mental health clinician in various different roles, I also oversaw components of the CAC at the Yale site as well. I'm also a survivor, and so this work is very close to my heart and continuing to advocate for the victims. So I'm really happy that I've been appointed to this, and Michaela Green was the previous representative from Klingberg, and I hope to be able to bring back a lot of good information for our team and contribute in any way that I can.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, we've had some great representation from Klingberg over the years, so thank you for filling in that role. All right, and then I'm going to sort of do Hollywood Squares here and just sort of go through on my screen, and it's called on people so we can get through. So top of my screen is Melissa Farley.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Farley. I am the Executive Director of the Judicial Branch's External Affairs Division, and I'm delighted to be part of the council with so many talented and dedicated individuals. Thank you.
Thanks. And Linda?
Good afternoon. It's great to see everyone. It's the first time in a while we've had a full quorum. I'm very excited about this. This is also weird because I just realized that this is my second to last council meeting before I retire. So it's very weird.
I knew that day was coming.
Yeah, I've been with the council since the mid 90s, so it really does feel like a very much of a lifetime commitment. But anyway, for the next 5 months, I am the Director of the Office of Victim Services in the Judicial Branch, and thank you all for volunteering for this committee.
Great. And then Gail Hardy, go for it.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gail Hardy, and I am an Executive Assistant State's Attorney at the Office of the Chief State's Attorney. I've been down here for a year now. Prior to that, I was the State's Attorney in Hartford for 13.5 years. I presently serve as the Chief State's Attorney's designee to this committee, and I'm happy to do so and enjoy all that I learn and try to contribute to this committee.
Thanks so much, Gail. And then Beth Hamilton.
Good afternoon. My name is Beth Hamilton. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence. I'm especially delighted by Mark's introduction, and also appreciate all of his amazing dedication to supporting survivors. I have been with this council for a number of years. Also, I like that we're all sharing our 10 years. And Linda, my goodness, it makes me very sad that you are leaving soon. But it's a pleasure to work and be with you all. And I actually really appreciate especially having this space with all of the things that are going on that are impacting victims. And it feels like at times an erosion of victims' rights in our state. And so I really appreciate being able to come together through this council and having that space.
Jim.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Morgan. I'm the program manager at OBS. I oversee all the VOCA assistance and compensation money that we receive from the Department of Justice.
And Debbie.
I'm Debbie Whitkin, the Executive Director of Connecticut Legal Services. We're the state's largest legal aid firm, and a lot of our clients are victims of violent crimes. I have a family member who was a homicide victim approximately 15 years ago. So I have both personal and professional interest in serving on this committee. And Linda, we are really going to miss you.
Oh boy, this is going to be a really interesting process, isn't it, Linda? And Linda just loves to be praised publicly. She just really eats that up. So we're going to really rub it in. All right, let's see. Now I'm on the people who are on the phone, and I'm going to start with Jessica. Is Jessica still on? Did she? Oh, there she is. She moved over to visit. Thank you, Jessica. Go ahead.
Yeah, my square moved over. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Pisano, and I am the Director of Victim Services with Survivors of Homicide, Inc. I've had the pleasure of being in this organization for over 15 years now, and it's always wonderful to be able to come together and do this really awesome work as a team to be able to help provide better services for victims of crime. And I just wanted to share that I'm going to miss Linda so much. When I first even got into the field after I graduated in domestic violence, I had the pleasure of meeting her and just gave me more passion to want to stay in this field. So I'm going to be lost without her when she leaves.
Oh, I can't
You're
wait to do.
still stuck with me for several months. So it's
Yeah.
okay.
I can't wait to do my I Remember Linda when stories. Okay, let's see. Yvette Young. Go for it.
Hello, everyone. Yvette Young. I'm the Associate Vice President of Programs and Advocacy at the Village for Families and Children, here representing the voice of human trafficking victims and survivors across the state. Linda, I'm going to say a shout out as well. I'm going to miss you. You were one of the individuals that approached me to be a part of this council, and I was truly grateful for you reaching out to me and advocating for me to sit at this table and to have a voice to represent victims on the human trafficking side. So definitely going to miss you. I'm going to have to send a side email just to sort of keep in contact, but really excited to be here and to represent the voice of our trafficking victims in the state.
I agree with that. Absolutely important voice. All right, let's see. I think, Jeannie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jean Wacebrod. I work in the Training and Outreach Unit at Office of Victim Services, and I provide administrative support for the council. Nice to see everybody.
And Jean does fabulous notes, so she is an essential part of this. Let's see, Jeannie, on the rest of the people who are on the call here, I don't recognize other. Go ahead.
Okay, we have Irene Michael.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Irene, why don't you go? Introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. My name is Irene Michael, and I'm the Chief Victim Compensation Commissioner. I've been part of the crime victim organization since way back in 1982. And I can't tell you how grateful I am to be part of this council. I'm still kind of reeling from the news, Linda, that you will be retiring. Just honestly, I have such respect and admiration for you. You have carried the organization forward in directions that are just spectacular, and it's just an honor. It's really been an honor for me to work with you and for you to have brought me into the advisory council. Just thank you for everything. I'm just very happy for you, but son of a gun, it's going to be a big shoes to fill. In any event, it's just a pleasure for me to be here today.
And this is only the first of the things we're going to talk about with Linda. All right.
Never mentioning that again.
Yes. Well, we're going to mention it every month for 5 months, so it's gonna go on for a while. Jean, who else do we have on the call here?
Well, we have 2 guests that are going to be speaking later.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
All right, and Bill and Jason. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we have a quorum, and Jeannie sent out the newest list of the members. So if you have that, you could keep score along with me, but that's available to you because everybody now is the new people are included in this list. So what I'm going to do is ask for a vote, a motion to approve the minutes from the June 8th, 2021 meeting.
So moved.
Okay, and who is the moving party? I'm sorry.
I did, Melissa Farley.
Melissa, thank you. Okay.
This is Beth, I can second.
Great, Beth is seconded. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Or raise your hand or do a little wiggle or something, yeah. All right, and anybody in opposition, opposed?
I will abstain because I wasn't at the meeting. That's Judge Baldini.
Okay, great. All right, so our minutes are approved. And Linda, as I remember from our pre-meeting that the folks from the victimization needs assessment are coming out at 2:30, so we have a little bit of time before that.
Well, actually, Susan, Adam is on, and I thought I saw Jonathan also on.
Yep. All right, that's fine. We can go there. That's fine.
Adam and Jonathan, are you ready to present? I know it's a few minutes early, but for just flow.
I'm more than happy to go if you'd like us to.
Okay, great. For the new folks, we had a presentation from this team before, so we're going to catch everybody up. And Linda, do you want to introduce, or is Jonathan going to go for it?
Well, just as a little, pretty much everyone here knows that we've been engaged with MDRs for several months now. They submitted the winning bid in a competitive bid to bring the judicial branch through a statewide victimization survey. This work started actually October of 20, Mark, when OPM brought in council state governments to start looking at this. And it was a really good partnership between OPM and the judicial branch, since a lot of the funding for victim services comes between the two of our agencies. So it's been my pleasure to work with Adam and Jonathan over the last couple of months, and he's got some very exciting updates of where the victimization survey is. So thank you, Adam.
Glad to present. Just first to give a general update on where we are with the overall project timeline. We started back in May, having a kickoff meeting, drafting the materials. We conducted a literature review to help guide us as we put together the survey instrument for the first phase of the project. This project has 3 different phases. One is a large-scale data collection effort conducted via an online survey that we have sent letters out to invite people to complete over the web. The second phase, which we are starting up currently, actually, is the in-depth interview phase, where we will conduct in-depth interviews to gauge both a deeper understanding of individuals' experiences, as well as to sort of draw out some themes and narrative around the data collection effort. And those will be conducted with people that opt in from that mail survey. And then lastly, we'll conduct focus groups in the new year with service providers themselves. So we went back and forth with some revisions for the survey instrument. And then we conducted a pretest. So in this, we actually reached out to various service providers to help us gather some pretesters. Our thanks to all that were able to both put the invitation out to the people that they work with, as well as complete the pretest survey itself. We took that feedback and integrated it into the survey instrument, and we've started data collection. So to give sort of a snapshot on where we are as of yesterday, in the overall random by address sample outreach that we have done, we have around 466 completed surveys. Most of these surveys have been done via the online survey instrument. We also are conducting a set of surveys with a panel sample. A panel sample is a sort of a group of individuals that have volunteered to conduct samples or to conduct surveys with independent companies. So we've contracted with a company to provide us with access to their panel. We're anticipating to get about 400 completes from that particular panel. With regards to data collection itself, we sent an invitation letter, and this included both language around the purpose of the survey, as well as instructions to log in and complete it. And then we followed up with online or email outreach to those within that sort of large mail list sample that we had email addresses associated with. And now we've actually sent out a second reminder letter. So this is just to the individuals that haven't responded or haven't requested to be removed from the list. And it's again exhorted them to complete the survey online, as well as impress upon them the importance of the research. And so we are well on our way to sort of hitting the targets that we're aiming for with regards to the number of completed surveys. And as we have been going along, we've also been asking people if they're interested in completing a more in-depth interview. So far, we have about 115 volunteers. We're intending on completing 50 interviews over the course of the next 2 months. Once we've finalized the in-depth interview guide, those 50 interviews will be drawn out of both physical location of interest, as well as population of interest and any, if there's interest in particular areas or crime experiences that Linda is interested in hearing more about, or you all are interested in hearing more about. So that's sort of the general where we're at so far. Before I sort of pass things off, any questions about the data collection effort?
Adam, could you just give the new people just a real quick, what kind of information you're asking these folks? What's in the survey? What's the general categories?
So the survey itself consists of a variety of different categories. The first is we sort of are looking for the delineation of what type of crime experience the person completing the survey has had. And then within that type of crime experience, we ask both about the services that they received, the experiences around the crime, as well as some demographic information. Any particular areas that they found were helpful, that sort of thing. And then in the in-depth interviews, we'll look more into some more sensitive topics. The in-depth interview guide is still in a draft phase, but we're interested in learning about people's experiences with interactions with law enforcement, with different services that they felt could have been provided for better support, and that sort of thing. And I can send along a more in-depth breakdown of the survey instrument to anyone who's interested.
Great, thank you. That was a good summary.
Any other questions about the data?
Yeah, Mark, did you have a question? You're on mute there.
There we are. I did. Thank you. And thank you for the hard work and diligent effort on the survey, especially because yesterday involved the release of the Uniform Crime Report nationally, which generated appropriately discussion on crime matters. It made me even more grateful that Connecticut has reached the point that it has in developing its own victimization survey, because I really find the National Crime Victimization Survey to be a tremendous resource to provide victim-centered information regarding experiences with crime. And as helpful as the UCR report is, it involves reports that were made to law enforcement regarding crime. But the survey is special because it will involve interviews with victims and survivors, and therefore capture people who did not report. It will capture a wider array of offenses and shed light on reasons why they did or did not report, perhaps prior instances of victimization, demographic information, whether they sought services or not, and much more detail on the impact of the crime, the type that it was carried out and the effect that it had on them. So my hat is off to the judicial branch. OPM played but a modest role in helping with strategic planning last year to try to create something of a format or a process for the branch to move forward. But to see where we are right now with these calls occurring and you graduating to more in-depth inquiries with the respondents is tremendous. I'd be curious at some point about timeline. I imagine that will be coming up, and sorry if I missed it. Just on, I know it was pretty aggressive timeline that you were operating under. I was curious about that, and I was also curious, something not quite as data related, is whether the people conducting the survey encountered people who experienced trauma on the phone, who sought referrals to services, who maybe hadn't been asked in a long time or perhaps ever about victimization. And on a less of a quantitative level, did anything like that occur? And do you have any insights for us on how the survey conductors responded to it?
Yeah, I'm happy to at least give you the intro to some of those answers. So first, to give a general timeline outline, we kicked off things back in May on the 10th. The survey itself started data collection. The first letters mailed out on August 23rd. And then we sent a series of email follow-ups. The second set of letters actually mailed out middle of last week, and I can tell because I'm getting a lot of phone calls from people asking about them. Inquiries that are interesting in that they are people who are wondering, does a crime count if it was 10 or 15 years ago? People that are, they've had experience around crime, but they don't feel like they have the experience necessary to complete the survey. And I, of course, encourage them that we are looking for all of the viewpoints of people that we are sending these out to. So we are hoping to wrap up data collection. The next aspect of data collection is moving into phone interviews. Currently, we've only conducted phone interviews with those that have called in and requested one, or emailed me and requested one. I think that's about 6 or 7 surveys at this point. As we move to a larger methodological work plan for that data collection, we're intending on collecting at least another 200 or 300 surveys via the phone. And we'll really be able to provide a little bit better insight into what that process looks like after we've sort of figured out what these conversations are going to look like. The IDIs in particular, as a separate part of the data collection, is going to be one where the people conducting those interviews have special training because it is such a sensitive nature, talking about people's past histories and trauma. We will provide them with a list of resources that they can go to. We, of course, have the Office of Victim Services support number on all of the materials that we send out. So we're able to direct them at the very least to that as a starting point. So we're hoping to finish out data collection for the quantitative survey by middle to end of November. That might get pushed back a little bit just due to some delays in the beginning of the project. The in-depth interviews, we're actually starting a little bit earlier in order to help sort of make up that slippage. And we should be able to provide a final report on the in-depth interviews as well as the quantitative survey end of this year, beginning of the next, and then moving into the focus groups around February of next year for a final wrap up in April. I think that hit all of your question points, but if I missed any, please let me know.
Good job, Mark. Good questions. Yeah, and we do have our next meeting of this council is in November, and then we meet again in February. So somewhere in there, I think, Adam, you would be giving us some more information. Perhaps, I don't know if November's too early, but certainly the first part of the year. All right. Any other questions or comments for Adam? Right. Is that everything that you were going to present, Adam?
There are just a couple of sort of interesting little tidbits. I don't know.
Go for it.
More interested in the methodological part of this than I am, but one thing that we wanted to make sure to do is to allow people to complete the survey in both English and Spanish to support that large minority speaking population. Currently, we've conducted 3 online surveys in Spanish, so a small percentage, but I am glad that we were able to offer that access to those individuals, and they were able to take advantage of it. One thing we're also trying to do is to really lower the barrier of entry to do an online survey. Once upon a time, you had to get the letter to tell you, go to the link, enter your passcode, a whole series of steps that really tend to slow down your motivation to complete this. For this particular introductory effort, we've included individualized QR codes that respondents can take the survey directly on their phone. They just need to open it up in their phone and just point it at the QR, and they'll get directed to their specific survey. While we can't necessarily tell you exactly how many are able to take advantage of this, we do have at least 171 of those 466 surveys that we've completed were done via a mobile device. So I think there's been a pretty good adoption of that data collection route. We've also got 4 completed on tablets that we know of. There's about half of them where either browser settings or that sort of thing prevent the collection of what type of device it was. But I'm really happy at how open and widespread avenues for doing this online survey have been.
Great. All right. Any other questions or comments? And Patrick is going to be speaking also? No.
Not necessarily. I was here to answer any questions, but Adam's done such a fantastic job so far. I have not had anything. So.
All right. I just wanted to give you the floor if you needed it.
Sure,
that's great.
Sure. I will just say regarding the data collection. So we also have Spanish-speaking interviewers. So when we conduct the telephone phase of the survey, we will offer that in Spanish as well. So a lot of times is what you see is uptake in Spanish-speaking interviews once you actually start calling people and doing those over the phone, because again, that does lower the barrier to actually completing surveys. So,
and I see a hand from Mark.
Go. You're on mute. Go ahead.
I'm so impressed with the techniques that are utilized for the surveying. I have to confess that when the strategic planning process was ongoing, it was a campaign season, and I kept imagining phone calls being placed to people. It just shows how antiquated my knowledge was of survey techniques, and it's exciting to hear that. And I know also we were concerned about the length of the survey. So hearing that not only people opted into mobile or tablet means of completing it is encouraging both that they're utilizing technology, also that that it can be conducted in that setting. Maybe people use phones for everything nowadays. I was wondering if it's maybe too premature to ask, but something that struck me about the survey is the ability to use it in many years to come, ways that it can be applied into the future, almost like an implementation phase of utilizing the results. You know, the National Crime Victimization Survey is national, but this would be a Connecticut-specific one that would give us a wealth of data. I wondered if, as you've seen some of the information come in, and given how skilled you are with empirical analysis, do you have any kind of vision for us on how this survey could have longevity to it and be used to help us?
I mean, that is an excellent question, and I do want to provide a quick touch on your earlier comment, and then I'll pass it off to either Jotham or Patrick to answer your larger question. But one thing that I do want to reassure you as well is that while this is an online survey primarily, we also are looking to, as I mentioned, make sure that we're not raising any barriers for completion. That's why we have the phone capacity to it. We don't want to exclude anyone that doesn't have internet access, anyone that doesn't have the ability to go online and complete it. So we will be doing phone follow-ups and inviting people to complete the survey over the phone, just because we find that especially in hard to reach minority populations, you tend to get a lot better response on a phone outreach than you do via online or mail outreach. With regards to sort of taking this and using it as the cornerstone for ongoing and trending research, I I personally think it definitely has that capability, but Patrick and Jotham both know a whole bunch more about research than I do. So I will pass this question off to them if they want to add to that.
I could happily jump in. And Mark, thank you. I think that's a great question. You noted, so I think the survey we designed was actually modeled after the National Crime Victimization Survey. So again, a lot of potential there because the National Crime Victimization Survey is something that is done on a regular basis. And again, one of the benefits of that is you're able to track trends and changes over time with regard to various types of crime. So it really provides a real detailed look at not only what's going on currently in terms of crime victimization, but actually changes over time. And the same thing could be done in Connecticut. Again, and I think we were really deliberate about how we designed the survey to really mimic that. So I think you have two great potential opportunities if you wanted to run the survey again in the future. And it could be a modified version of it. It wouldn't necessarily have to be as large, but you could also collect very similar information in the future to track, again, trends over time and what's changing within the state. It also allows you then to compare the results that you're getting to the national survey. So you can look at what's going on in Connecticut compared to what's happening at the national level. So I think it does provide a lot of opportunities. And then on a qualitative level, there's always the opportunity, especially when you're implementing sort of quality improvement changes. So again, hopefully one of the things that comes out of this effort is a lot of I think recommendations for improving services, and again, identifying where there are gaps and where there are needs that are not met. And in the future, research could be focused on following up on those to see, okay, well, these are the things that were identified last year. We've implemented, changes X, Y, and Z to address that. Now let's do some additional research to actually find out how that went. So, and then that's a great use of future research to actually track, okay, how are things actually going? Are we actually improving?
Great. All right. Any other comments or questions? All right. Thank you so much, Adam and Patrick. I'm sure we'll be seeing you again. Your presence will be awaited because I think you've got some people that are just real crazy to see that data.
We are as well, so I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Debbie, do you have a question or a comment? No, sorry. So we will try, I think there was some information, Linda, that was sent out, or maybe Jeannie, previously on the survey. Linda, was there information sent to the council on the survey before? Is that correct?
I think we've sent some. This was probably the most complete. I've mentioned it at some of the past meetings,
okay.
But this was the most complete overview.
Great. All right. So we'll keep people. If you have any questions about that, let Jeannie know, and since any information that she can pass on. All right. So I'd like to come back to the OVS report. Linda, do you want to start, or should Jim, or how do you want to do that?
I think Jim, why don't you start, please?
All right. Jim is one of our other fabulous OVS staff people that we couldn't have a meeting without him. Go ahead, Jim.
Yep. Let me get started here. First off is the victim compensation statement that we normally send out. This one is for the month ending August 31st. There are no changes to the state appropriation for the year. It's still for compensation, $2,025,000. Our federal grants are also listed here. We've got our open awards for 2018 through 2021. This year we plan on using the 2018 and 2019 grants. If we need to use the other ones, we will. So far, we spent $624,370 through August 31st, and that's about $256,000 higher than last year through August. So that's a big increase just for 2 months into the year, but it's representative of the large increase in the claims that have been coming into the office. So the expenses are going up accordingly. But as I mentioned, we do have our federal fund available to cover any expenses that the state funds can't cover.
And is there a reason you can identify that the number of claims has gone up in that time period? Just the times we live in, or is there anything in particular?
Well, Susan, I'm going to talk a little bit about this during my report, but I think there's this is a convergence of a few things. But I think mainly it's the changes in our legislation that happened back in 2018 that opened up the statutes. But I also think it's really working with so many of our partners. Our numbers for sexual assault folks are up. Our numbers for homicide victims are up, drunk driving. So it's really the education we've done over the last few years with all of our community partners and our stakeholders understanding that even if a victim doesn't need or doesn't have expenses currently, it's better to get the application filed and then have it available when you need it. So much more timely. When I started, homicide victims were coming in, applications for homicide victims, were coming in almost at the 2-year mark. And now we're getting them sometimes within 24 hours. And Andrew Wood's group is amazing with that, as is Jessica's group. So it's a very much of an understanding of the importance of these benefits.
Yes, and that's one of the things that, Linda, we're going to talk about that you've accomplished in this world, because I remember that going back many years. All right. Any other comments for Jim or questions? All right, Jim, you want to continue? I know you have another piece to your report here.
Yep, I've got a couple things. The next one is the court collection summary. This is for the fiscal year that ended June 30. We received $727,620 for the year, a decrease of $500,000 from the year before, primarily due to the pandemic and the shutdown of the courts. 70% of the collections did come in through the Central Infractions Bureau e-pay system for cases that were disposed of online. So that really helped keep the program going. Total overall revenues for the year were 1.3 million below the year before. But we did start to see a slight increase in the fourth quarter as the court started to reopen. And I just wanted to mention on the worksheet, on the quarter 4, the header says April 1st to April 30th. That should actually be June 30th. It would be nice if we got 200,000 for a month, but unfortunately that's 3 months. But it is the highest quarter for the year, so we're hoping the revenues will start to trend upward.
Yes, I did kind of notice that. I'm thinking, oh, that's a big number. All right, any questions about this? This is something that we have been attentive to on the council, just to make sure that people understand the impact of not only the courts being closed, but to continue to pick up these numbers. All right, Jim, anything else you want to share? Go ahead, Linda.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I just want to do this because I have to leave at 3 o'clock for that audit meeting. Want to give an update on the VOCA fix. It finally passed the Senate and was signed into law by the president in July. I'll give you an overview of the changes and how it impacts us. First was federal court collections. Monetary penalties from federal deferred prosecutions and non-prosecutions that used to go into the general fund will now be deposited into the Federal Crime Victims Fund. This change was intended to stabilize and then increase future revenues into the fund to offset the recent declines in revenues from federal court cases. We don't know what the short-term impacts are going to be for the fund because since this didn't go into effect until July, there was only 2.5 months left of the federal fiscal year. So I know a lot of states were hoping for a big impact now. It may not be seen for another year or two, depending how the fines come in. There were a couple changes related to victim compensation and how they calculate the grants that each state receives. One was that the percentage that they used to calculate the federal grant was increased from 60% of state expenses to 75%. And then the other was that if any revenues that we used to receive for like civil recoveries or lawsuits or subrogations on any claims that we paid, we used to have to deduct those revenues from our expenses. We no longer have to do that. So the benefit for this is that our compensation grants will go up. And actually went up quickly starting in 2021 because OVC hadn't awarded those grants yet, so they went back and recalculated them. So our compensation grant went from $935,000 to $1,269,000. So that's an extra $334,000 in compensation.
Wow.
The bad news, however, is that because the 2021 appropriations are already in place, the assistance side had to pay for those increases, and our assistance grant was decreased by another $557,000 from on top of the decrease that already happened. So our 2021 award is now $11,329,000. So the net effect between the two changes was it's a net decrease of about $223,000 between the two grants. So we shall see what happens going forward. Another change they made for victim compensation was that it clarified that state programs have the discretion to apply an exception to the statutory requirement that compensation programs must promote victim cooperation with reasonable law enforcement requests. States have always had the ability to do this, but now it's clarified in the statute. Another change was no cost extensions for VOCA funding. States now have the ability to request no cost extensions to the grant award period. Previously, the VOCA grants were the only Department of Justice grants where we couldn't do that. So what would end up happening is if there was money left at the end of the grant period, it went back to DOJ. So now we can, if we know we're going to have money left, or any state, they can request a no cost extension so that that money gets fully spent. Another change, a couple changes affecting VOCA assistance regarding match and the required 20% match. Each state is required to create and make public a match waiver policy for subrecipients who wish to request a waiver from the VOCA required match. Most states, including Connecticut, already had a policy in place, but it's now in statute that states have to have this policy. And then something that's going to impact all of our current contractors for the duration of the national pandemic, state agencies or the state VOCA administrators must issue match waivers for recipients of VOCA funding for the duration of the pandemic plus 1 year after it ends. So what that means, and we will get all the particulars out to everybody once we have them, there will be no match required for the current year and potentially for the first year of the next RFP. We're working with OVC on how they want states to document that because there's a specific process. That will be happening. There won't be any match required for this year and probably not for the first year of next year's bid. And I hope to get something out to all our contractors this week just to let them know that that's going to take place, and that let them know that somewhere down the, hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll have more specifics on what has to be done to make that happen. So that's the big change that'll hopefully benefit our contractors is matches waived for this year.
Excellent.
One other quick thing related to OVC that's not related to the VOCA fixed. On September 20th, they released a bulletin clarifying that VOCA victim assistance funds can be used to support community violence intervention efforts. Direct services can include hospital and community-based violence intervention programs that provide multidisciplinary victim services such as safety planning, advocacy, trauma-informed care, and ongoing support services and assistance for survivors. These things were never prohibited under VOCA, but they wanted to put this bulletin out just to clarify that they are allowable.
Jim, is that like the program that Andrew Woods runs? Would that be what that would fall into?
Something that he's doing, yes, or some of the new programs that were coming up that they're using the federal recovery money for some of the new programs that the state is doing. They just wanted to clarify this because sometimes VOCA guidelines can be vague on what they do or don't cover. So they just wanted to put this out there that VOCA funds can be used for those type of programs.
Okay. So that's a clarification. And thank you. That's the VOCA fix has been a topic that has been on our agenda for a bit of a time. Our agenda around the roundtable discussion on legislative and issues at the federal level. So I think we've got some clarity, particularly for the folks who are involved in the VOCA money. So, all right. Any other questions? Jim, you did a fabulous job. For those of you who are new in the council, Jim comes regularly to our meetings and will produce these 2 documents for us. So just get used to what it looks like, and he's always great about explaining what the differences are and what's happening, what's good and what's bad, and anything that we may need to pay attention to in our particular programs or in general. So. Thank you, Jim, as always. Jessica, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, Jim, actually, I was just wondering if we chose to still do our own internal match and track it, is that something that's okay to still do?
Yeah, I think you can still do it. I think we'll probably put more guidance out about that because this is different than if you don't have the match. You know, obviously you still have it. It's just that OV saying you don't have to require it. So yes, we know volunteers will still be there, and you'll probably still want to keep tracking it for internal purposes. But we'll get more guidance out on how it impacts the budget and stuff as soon as we get clarity from them.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, I think we're ready to move on. Linda, do you want to come back to your report?
Well, actually, I'd like to, Jim is jumping off. He has led our agency through both an OVC audit of our compensation program and our assistance program. So he's been very busy. And you're jumping off for an exit interview, Jim?
Yeah, we're having the exit interview at 3 o'clock for the assistance review.
So thank you. Herculean work that's required to do that. But the other piece that was Jim was talking, yes, Debbie gave Jim a round of applause. And this is why it's so important to have OPM at the table, because one of the pieces that we don't often talk about, but it's really come clear with the VOCA fix, is the hierarchy of decision making. So OVC has this huge pot of money. And as Jim said very nicely, VOCA assistance is really what's left. And then on top, right before that is compensation. So when the percentage was increased, that took away from the VOCA assistance. But on top of that is also what Mark's organization manages. It's the Violence Against Women Act. Many things come off the top before we actually get to the VOCA assistance or comp. So it's where we may be having less of an impact in the community. Some of those partners that we're working with may be leaning more on VAWA money, and yet that money isn't going up either. Mark, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but right now in this fix, there's such a tight whatever between the funding that you oversee, some of the funding you oversee, and what the judicial branch oversees.
Okay. And
Thanks.
we will go ahead, Mark.
I just wanted to say that we're at OPM we're experiencing a transition in the administration of VAWA, and we are preparing not only for a long-term plan for our grant administrator, but also the strategic planning process for our grant will proceed through, I think, spring of next year. So this seems to be an ideal time for creating better alignment among the federal and state funding to direct victim services, to identify areas of allowability and overlap of allowability of expenses between VAWA and VOCA. And if there are impacts of a negative nature expected for any of the service providers, to see where VAWA could be a potential fit for that. I think that I've been following Linda in our other discussions about concerns around short-term impacts on the VOCA assistance, and we want to be helpful. in that. And I think that exercise could be a very helpful one to better align our efforts on these two funding streams, to be more strategic, holistic with how we provide support to providers. So all that is to say, count us in the effort. That's been one benefit of the victimization surveys. At one point, the administrator under the Department of Administrative Services over PHPSA was joining the discussions. And I just think more of those kind of funder conversations are helpful for consistency and holistic approaches.
Okay. Any other comments? Or thank you so much. It's a really good interweaving conversation, which is one of the things that I think the council has the potential to do, is to get everybody to talk to each other in one time in one place. So thank you for that. So let's, Linda, you're going to come back to.
Sure, I have a few updates. As Jim alluded, we are spending more from our compensation, out of our compensation program. I just want to give you a kind of a basis for where we're at. I mentioned earlier that in 2018, we had the legislative change, or 2017, that resulted in the highest ever receipt of applications, which was over 1,600 for calendar year 2018. As of close of business yesterday, we had already data entered 1,494. So we are only 201 less than our highest year. We've already exceeded the number we received in 2020, and we're 40 under where we were in 2019. So we're really feeling the, we're excited because people are getting access to a program that they deserve and need and can really help short-term, long-term. But it's overwhelming for the team I have over there. The 5 examiners and 2 supervisors, but they're doing the yeoman's work. And I think one of the things that's really interesting, and it could be attributed to many things, but civility seems to have left a lot of the interactions we have with people who are calling. I'm constantly amazed at the aggressive language that is used with my compensation team, and the dismissal as that they're less than intelligent, or really very nasty negative comments, when we're often usually the bearer of the bad news, because we're waiting for people to give us the information. So it's much less civil than it has been, which is also takes its toll on people who are answering the phones and dealing with extraordinarily high caseloads. And I think the other piece that which we never talk about here, but we have just done our total redo of our compensation policies and procedures, which are always Herculean, and Judge Carroll did approve those. So it makes the auditors happy. They just provided some feedback, and we were able to, because we were in a revision, we were able to accommodate them. The second program I want to talk about is our sexual assault forensic examiner program. Talk about rolling with the time. We successfully navigated the move from in-person to virtual. On October 4th, we have our next class starting. As a reminder, we have the ability to train medical professionals from any hospital in the state that we have a contract with, the judicial branch has a contract with. And we also, that training will start on October 10th. There are often individuals, medical providers, who will apply to come into the program as a responder. This class, we have 15 nurses, they're all nurses, 15 nurses enrolled in the training program. It's 41.5 hours of didactic. It's all done over Teams. And we have I think 25 content experts coming to present on them. I lead it off by talking about the Office of Victim Services. We have someone from the forensic lab. We have law enforcement. We have someone talking about STIs. It's very much of a comprehensive program. And the 15 students represent 4 hospitals. And as I said, one of the 15 will actually be joining the program. Using, again, the technology that is available to us, the SAFE program has been able to maintain and really enhance in some respects our monthly quality assurance meetings. Once a month for 2 hours, all of the SAFEs meet, again, by teams, and now we've expanded that to individuals who have been trained by us who are not in the program. So our reach is just expanding, and there's over 100 medical providers who've been trained and who are providing that quality of care, not only in the 8 hospitals we respond to, but in hospitals across the state. One of the significant, although we've risen to the challenge of incorporating remote technology into our training, one of the many downsides is COVID is the for me unfathomable impact that working in hospital emergency departments or in critical care has had on the nursing in the medical profession as a whole. And we're really seeing that as in our sexual assault forensic examiner program. Right now, we have almost half the number of responding sexual assault forensic examiners than we had pre-pandemic. Some have taken leaves of absence. Some have just changed careers because they can no longer deal with they have found it extremely difficult, and I won't put a word into anybody's to their story, but the stories we have heard have been how demoralizing it has been, how absolutely difficult it has been to bring someone through the last moments of life without family and members around. So it's been a particularly hellacious experience. And I said, some people just can't add this per diem job, and some people are just backing away from nursing as a whole. So we're really hoping that in the next year or 2, we can start slowly rebuilding to those levels that we've had and begin to expand the program once again. And if that's the hard news, the good news is, and I'm very thankful to the judicial branch. I've said my thank yous to our Executive Director, Ty Erickson, and the Executive Director of Administrative Services, Libby Graham, because it feels like it's been Christmas at OVS. We have been so fortunate to be able to hire new employees. Some of them are from within our own ranks. There have been promotion transfers, but now we have 3 victim services supervisors for the victim advocates. We have introduced a regional level of supervision to give our individual advocates far more support. Again, as Judge Baldini knows, and those of you who have worked in the courts, the last 18 months has been very, very difficult and very, very trying. And certainly our advocates were right in line with all court personnel, and then being caught in some respects of trying to explain these changes to the to victims who seek our services. So we lost a victim service supervisor to CSSD, and that left us with 1. And after some detailed data, the decision was made to, instead of replace the 1 person who left, it were actually to be able to replace the vacancy that we had since 2018. So our 2 new supervisors started on September 10th, and our 3rd supervisor has been with us for decades. The other really great news is we will, for the first time since 2008, OVS has actually hired someone to do our training. We've taken a victim advocate who knows our training we do for police, the training we do on all of for contractor training, and that person will be moving to central office and now be a full-time trainer. We also think not only can we up our game with our stakeholders, we can expand the people we should be talking to, and again, using the data from the victimization survey to identify populations which really should know about OVS, but don't. And then the third piece of good news is that I don't know if everybody knows here, but someone stole one of my team members. No, don't look too guilty, Mark. Don't look too guilty. For those of you who don't know, Valina Carpenter left the Judicial Branch Service and moved to the Office of Policy and Management about a month ago, Mark.
About a month ago. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're low on your points, Mark.
I'm going to be kicked off the committee. I'll be the first person who gets kicked out of our first meeting.
You know, you should have put that in your resume before we even considered you, really.
But it's such a great opportunity for Valina to go from direct service to really help, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, to really influence policy and grant making decisions. So I'm very thrilled for her, and I'm equally thrilled for myself because we were able to replace that position. So the trainer and the new deputy director will start on the 22nd of October. And the last two really amazing pieces is that we received permission to hire, this was an internal posting for a victim services advocate to be assigned to our helpline, because one of our helpline advocates is going to Hartford to fill one of those vacancies. And then we have the ability to, we have been able to post externally for 8 victim services advocates, and that closes on Monday. So we will, with all of these changes and additions, we will be back to a staffing level we were in 2017. So I'm very, very excited about that. We will be able to double and triple advocates in some courts. I can think of Bridgeport has a huge caseload there, and it's been a single advocate on the JD for the last 2.5 years. Now we'll be able to put 2 advocates in that JD. So lots of changes when we come back in November. We will really share with you all of the positives, and you'll be able to, we will introduce you to the new trainer and the new deputy director. So really great stuff happening on that regard, and that's the report at this point. Thank you, Susan.
You're more than welcome. That sounds like you're going out in style here, Linda. That's
Susan, stop that. Just bring the agency where it needs to be.
Well, and like I said, I have been through these time periods and heard these reports regularly, so you've done a great job. And I'm very concerned that people are talking uncivilly to, I know it's the times and where people get some chance to vent or something, but that this council thinks your staff is fabulous. So if there's any way we can, we used to be able to, when we actually met in person, sometimes, take a little tour and meet people and stuff, but let them know that we are still here, virtually at least. But it's a very tough job, and you don't need people to vent. All right. So what I wanted to do is we've been having on our agenda, we've been having 2 topics, and I wanted to give people a chance there. We try to make them roundtable discussions. I also want to put on the table whether we want to continue the COVID topic. We started this back in March of 2020 when everything shut down, just to give a chance, a location, a forum for people to talk about the impact of COVID. I think the last time we had this discussion at our last meeting in June, we talked more about vaccination rollout and those kinds of issues. So I wanted to keep it on the agenda as long as people felt that was something. I know we're not out of the woods here yet. There's other issues that'll keep coming up, but I think a lot of the concerns were around the courts being closed and what they all meant. So let me open up that discussion. And the other one, I'm going to try to double them up a little bit because we're running a little bit, not out of time, but I wanted to not jam up the agenda. If there's anything that people want to talk about, I know we're not in legislative session yet, but coming into the new session for next year. But any issues that are coming up around legislative issues, Jim gave us a great update on the federal level with the fix, the VOCA fix. Who would like to start? I'm not going to call on people, so if you want to just jump in or raise your hand, I can. If you can't see the screen, I will try to navigate here. So either on the COVID impact, any things that are coming up. I know we now have some booster shots that are coming up, and I understand they're supposed to be soon, maybe vaccinating kids under 12 or 9 to 12, something like that. And then also about legislative issues that you might be looking at for the next session.
I can jump in, Susan, and start us off.
Okay, great.
For us, I mean, I think the COVID stuff kind of is, it's all still affecting things. I think some of it, things we've sort of moved past and really figured out some solutions. I think there's other places where we're just going to see the reverberations of the consequences, intended and otherwise, right, of the pandemic that will certainly impact survivors for a long time to come, and service provisions and some of the other things we've talked about. What I would continue to want to raise, I guess, to this group and in general, right, is the ways in which, and I think we're going to see this perhaps through some of the sentencing commission work that's coming up and other places where I think there's some real challenges with an erosion of victims' rights, right? The way in which we kind of have swung a pendulum, which I do think there is critical, important, valuable work happening around criminal justice reform. I think at times we're losing sight of the impacts of the crimes that have been, that victims have experienced and what those impacts are, right? And our responsibility also to address that and support victims through that process. When specifically in terms of the sentencing commission, the other piece, right, and things that come up is we also forget about victim notification and about the places in which the state, right, is beholden to let folks know about changes and the impacts that has for folks. So places where I think that we need to, this in some ways falls, I think, probably in line with some of Linda's thinking, like the places where you need to think about folks' humanity at the same time that we're thinking about a process-oriented solution, right? So I know we've talked in the past around different ways and concerns around the criminal justice system and some of those reforms and the ways that victims are feeling really left out of the process. They're feeling harmed by the process. They are feeling like they have a lack of information. And sometimes when the information is delivered, it is untimely and it is harmful to them. And so I would really love to continue, and I know we don't have time today, but really continue to have conversations amongst this group to really think about the ways in which we prioritize the needs of victims and not let them continue to get lost in the path that we're sort of forging forward. And I think there's some nuance to that, right? I mean, certainly what I'm talking, and I have the reference most around, is victims of sexual violence, where there is a long-term trauma impact. There's lots of ways in which I think that work needs to be done very specifically with survivors of violence. But I think probably most of us here who are working with and representing victims, I'm guessing, are feeling some of the same things, and that victims are getting a little bit lost in the process, and we need to treat them with more care through the judicial process than we perhaps currently are. So I don't know if that's the kind of feedback you're looking for, but I would really love to continue to have those conversations amongst this group.
Let me ask this question. Is it a conversation that we should assign it to a topic, to a specific kind of conversation, rather than putting it on a roundtable? You know what I mean? We haven't sort of put it on the agenda exactly, and what that would look like. And who, would there be a presenter that would be helpful? I don't know. I'm just trying to, does anybody have any thoughts about that?
Is it possible, because I know that you've mentioned this a couple of times, is it possible to have like a smaller group of individuals who are interested in having this conversation, pushing this agenda forward from this group meet, so that there is really sort of focused time and energy on the topic rather than just one conversation?
That's possible. I don't know, in all the years I've been on the council, we've done that particularly, but why not? That would be certainly, and I know Bess raised this before in some of the legislation that was up last session. So it's been, you're right, it's been a kind of a peripheral issue. Anybody else have a thought about this?
Yes, Susan, this is Andrew Woods. Hello,
Oh,
everyone.
hi, Andrew. Good to see you. Or
Good to
almost
see
see you. I can hear you. Yes.
Good to be heard. I actually, interestingly, Beth raises something that actually draws me back to what Linda mentioned about civility as the victims of violent crime are engaging the office. And I'm just curious as to whether or not, Linda, we might be able to get somewhat of a, is there a way to determine what is driving this, or at least what is motivating or what is bothering or concerning folks that's calling the office related to their applications, and whether or not they too get a sense that their rights are being eroded, that they're not getting the support and services in the community. And so that's what comes to mind when Beth raises, a few things come to mind, but that one draws me straight to the question of, by the time they get to victim service, your office, that they pretty much just lost all hope or just completely frustrated. And again, it could tie to what Beth is speaking to. It can also tie to what else can we be doing better as providers to assist and accompany those that we have been serving. So I just want to put that on the table for us to think about. And Linda, certainly if your team can somewhat get down, get us some inkling as to, what the frustration is. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for raising that. I'm certainly, yes. I mean, all I have to do is talk to some of my folks, and I have stories, and we can certainly put that together.
So let me go back to Yvette's suggestion. It sounds to me like if a small group of people from the council would like to get together and even discuss how to have this conversation, what are the pieces of it, and if there's any particular thing that's coming up that might be a forum for this. I don't know. I don't have that knowledge. But Beth, do you have a thought about that? Would that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing. I mean, I think I've seen it among some of our colleagues, and I know when the last time we had this conversation, and I apologize, I know that it's me who's bringing this up and kind of beating on this drum.
Okay.
But
Don't
it
worry.
remains consistent, and I remain seeing it, in the folks and the feedback that we get directly from survivors across the state. So it feels imperative to bring it to the table to all of you. I'm really confident. One is I'm happy to work with our colleagues like such as CCADV, other folks, right, who could identify for you the types of things we're talking about, right, the ways in which some of those pieces and the conversation, legislation, other policy reform is happening, and the concerns that we have. I also would just love, I think at times, I wonder if there's ways, and Linda and I were having a conversation recently, for example, I asked for her feedback around the 2 proposals around the sex offender registry changes and what impacts that would have, intended and unintended, right, for victims and notifications and pieces. I also just wonder sometimes if there are ways that some of the folks around this table can help to inform our conversations and help us think through strategically ways to move things forward that have more of an eye towards ensuring that victims feel like they have a voice, a say, they're well informed through the process. I guess I can also, I want to say very clearly, I can step back, right? If this is not an issue for other folks, if folks do not see this or share this viewpoint, if their constituencies are not sharing that, right, then I can find other avenues for finding a group of colleagues and other allies, right, to continue to move that conversation forward. But I do think as we move through the next legislative session, we're going to continue to see this kind of pattern. And I think our survivors are going to continue to come to us and share these kinds of disappointing, their disappointment in that system. And Andrew, I want to also just finally say, I really think you're spot on, right? I think that there's ways in which folks are being treated so poorly and are being forgotten. And I don't think by necessarily ill-intentioned individuals, but by a system that is not intended to support them and support them through the kind of trauma responses and things that they might experience. So I do think that that probably has a lot to do with why, when folks are finally getting to folks like, OVS and the victim comp program, they really are frustrated. They are feeling invisible. They are feeling like there's not a lot of avenues and like nobody is really paying attention to, the needs that they have. And that's hard to articulate, right? Especially if you're not seeing it big picture. So I'm happy again. In any way to support, I'm happy also to be more quiet and find other places to have the conversation.
Beth, I've known you for a while. I've never known you to be quiet, so.
I'm working on it.
Well, maybe, when you're sleeping would be a good idea. I don't know. Judge Baldini, you have your hands raised there in the appropriate fashion?
And I wanted to just respond in a couple of ways. One, I'm new to the council, so I've enjoyed listening for the better part of the hour and a half to learn a little bit more about your perspectives. I do think that with respect to hearing victims' voices, you need to be assured how the judicial branch handles that situation, and that is an integral part of new judge training. Making sure that judges understand what the Victims' Rights Amendment is. Making sure that at a disposition or at the time of plea, they have an opportunity to be heard. We're also seeing, and I think you just touched on it, Beth, is when cases come up for sentence modifications, that we're aware that there's a prerequisite that a victim be notified that a sentence modification has been filed. I will say that in my experience, that is something that is sort of a shared interest with the state's attorney's office, that I know that prosecutors routinely work with the victims' advocates in the courthouses where I've worked. Certainly the people that are here on this proceeding certainly have other ways in which they're serving victims of crimes, and that's in forms of compensation, providing them with services. So I did want to just share that with you, that is a commitment that we as judges are tasked with, to make sure that we understand that, and that we understand what the Victims' Rights Amendment, what prerequisites there are, and also making sure that when victims do address the court, that they understand what the process is in a very concise fashion, what judges have to consider in terms of sentencing, so that they understand and feel vested in the judicial process. I know that that's something that is sort of imparted to the judges in the state of Connecticut, and it's something that we try to follow. So I did want to respond in that way, and certainly if there are circumstances where it's not being met, certainly that's something that we can talk about, but I did want to add that to the conversation.
So it's a piece of it. So what I've just been hearing that there's a there could be a conversation about the issues that are coming up, where they're coming up, and how they're coming up. Secondly, whether there are forums, are there any forums that forums in which these issues or needs are being addressed, or if not, then what would be a forum? And can this be a forum, at least for the discussion of that? And then the last thing you talked about, Beth, is some kind of strategic plan, vision, thought about how this might be addressed. What I hear from you is it's coming up from the folks, the victims who are out there, who are not empowered individually, perhaps, to address it. So what would be a collective way to do that? Is that what we're talking about, Yvette? Is that what we're talking about, do you think? For a discussion at this council? And Gail wanted to say something, so let me do that first and we'll come back. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand politely raised there. Go ahead.
I just wanted to also respond to Beth's concerns. There are a lot of reforms taking place or even being discussed around areas like Judge Baldini mentioned, around areas of sentence modification and fixing the sex offender registry and victim notification, and sometimes how victim notification is lacking in this regard. So I just wanted to make sure that Beth knows that at the Chief State's Attorney's Office, that's something that we're also discussing how to best ensure that the victim's needs and the victim's concerns are not forgotten in this regard. As I mentioned earlier, I have been in Hartford for 13 and a half years, and during my time in working with Judge Baldini and the other judges there was always a query made of the state's attorney as to whether or not victims had been properly notified with respect to any sort of proceeding that was taking place. And if the judges found that the victim hadn't been properly noticed or hadn't had an opportunity to address the court, the judges would usually continue the case to give the victim an opportunity to be heard. So, I just wanted to make sure that that knows that that is something that we often talk about. And to the extent that this committee decides that a smaller group should be convened to address those issues, I would be willing to serve on that committee.
All right. Anybody else want to join in here? All right.
Actually, if I could just share, that would also be something I would be interested in joining up as well. Is the courts are opening back up now. We're definitely seeing some things that are happening, both in the good and both in the bad. But I just think it would be good, just to kind of brainstorm and come together and share all of our experiences and to, kind of see what we can do together just to help make this an easier process for the victims that we work with.
All right. So I have Gail, Jessica, Yvette, and Beth. And Andrew, are you interested in?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, because we haven't had this as a thing in the past, but we could certainly, it's not necessarily a thing that we can do. So my suggestion is that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you get together. It would be helpful, and Linda, I'm trying to think of a precedent here, to bring a discussion to the council, at least the pieces that are out there. And it sounds like there are things happening and there are things that are not happening. So the question is, how could the things that are happening keep happening, and how could the things that aren't happening have some kind of a strategic, I wouldn't say plan, but focus, and to see if that is, rather than working individually and in frustration, to put it together. Is that what we're trying to get to? Gail, did you have your hand up? And so does Mark, but let's do Gail first. Go ahead.
No, I haven't learned how to put my hand down.
Okay. Well, it's the sign of the times, the things we have to learn. All right, Mark, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. And I was worried that I cut the line over Ms. Young. I know you're trying to unmute yourself. Would you care to go first? I don't want me to add something that piles on top of the topics that you were perhaps intending to weigh in on much earlier.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, I serve on the Sentencing Commission, and I appreciate what Beth is raising. And I agree with just the need to help to elaborate on the impact of such policies on victims and survivors. And on the when the sex offender registry modification proposal was raised, there was questions asked about who from the victim survivor side is on this meeting and able to weigh in, and the victim advocate, Natasha Pierre, did, and she did, I think, a really powerful job sharing input. But there was question raised at one point over whether a broader group of victim advocates had been engaged, perhaps outside of the commission, in order to collect input and bring back. The commission is meeting, I think, on these topics and won't vote on them until November or December. The next month, November, December. What I tried to raise was, and this perhaps aligns with the sentencing modification proposal, was I think both of the sex offender registry reforms apply to anyone on the registry. There is no exception. So it's anyone with a lifetime requirement to register. And the Sentencing Commission did analysis on earlier proposals and indicated that the vast majority, 3/4 of the people on the registry were convicted of risk to a minor or sexual assault. And that indicated to me that there are victims and survivors in these cases who have been through not only the trauma of the original event, but the entire justice system. And then now, years or even decades after, there would be this notice provided that the person who committed harm to you is seeking a removal from the registry. And I don't know if that in itself is a reason for rejection of the policy, but the need is to have appropriate safeguards and planning, because this is adding on a whole new array of victims who would need to be notified via SAVIN. And I don't know if SAVIN would even apply if a new case is being created for this petition. And then court-based victim advocates to help the person through it. And I think the question is whether those services would be adequate for a survivor or victim who may have left the state, gone away to college, et cetera. So the commission is wrestling with those issues. There was, at the last meeting, a lot of questions raised, some of which would incur budget, others of which were concerns. And it seems as if it left the commission with, a desire to dig in deeper on these topics. And so I wonder if this is an opportunity, as this is being considered, just as a way to ensure that not just, there is language in there about, victims, but there is greater elaboration of assurances or other policies that will engage victims and survivors in it. There's a lot of questions I think the commission is still working through. But there's no one better to give that expertise than someone who's worked in victim services. And I think even the commission itself was kind of reaching out for added perspectives, and it would be great to provide that to them before a vote is taken.
Yvette, did you want to add anything or respond to what Mark just put on the table there?
No, I mean, it sounds like that would definitely be a need, and it's the synergy that's happening right now with this conversation. So thanks, Beth, for bringing this up now twice. But I think these conversations are so important, and how do we move from dialogue to actually action and get the information out there that everyone needs for their different areas so that they can activate or advocate for some changes within the system. So this is great to hear, and it's great to see so many people passionate about, really considering victim rights and what they need, not what we perceive or think they need, but really hearing from them and being able to elevate their voices at these key tables. So,
Beth, what do you think of where we're going here?
I mean, I think that I would love, one is I appreciate all of you humoring me and also bringing everything that you're bringing to the table, because I do think there are places where us having collaborative conversations lead to a different outcome than us having silent conversations with colleagues in similar fields. So I really appreciate and agree with that. I would love, I'm always up for this conversation. And I think that, we're talking about the sex offender registry, which does not impact all of you, but that notification process, how victims are treated, the access information they have does impact all of the survivors and victims that we work with. So I think there's some far larger reaching implications of having the conversation and setting a precedent for pausing to consider in the process, right? Like what that means for victims. So I would love to, I'm very happy to host it and sort of pull it together with folks who are comfortable doing so. Given, particularly on this issue, we've given lots of feedback, but I would love to, in the meantime, maybe before November, right? I know that we're not gonna be able to do it next week or anything like that, but I'm happy to sort of, and I will invite everybody. So even if folks maybe didn't say yes today, you can still have an opportunity to opt in.
I was gonna suggest that, just to notice the The whole
I'll-
council, right? That'd be great.
Email everybody and try to have a meeting of us just to come together to sort of talk about it and identify, is there an ask or a larger conversation to bring to this, the full group in October. And so hopefully that works for most folks. We'll find a time that works for the majority. But I really, I do think it behooves us to have conversations that sometimes may feel like it doesn't apply to everybody, but really are having us think more strategically about what we are tasked with, right? Which really is, how do we, and I love your activate and advocacy language, Yvette, but like what are we beholden to, right? What is the constituency that this group is beholden to? And how do we bring in more conversations where we really are trying to either establish policies or think through different protocols and processes that are happening in the state that could support folks better, right? We're not trying to, I don't want to throw everything away that folks are doing. Again, I think there's really important, really critical work being done. But I do think that unless we push on the conversation of victims' rights and of the things that they need through the process, it's not happening organically anywhere. So I appreciate the opportunity to anybody who wants to have the conversation, to have it, and then we can bring it back perhaps in November if we could give an update perhaps on that next meeting.
So we have our next meeting is scheduled for November the 9th. And Mark, you mentioned a November deadline for the commission, the Sentencing Commission. Is that?
Yes, there is. The group met earlier this month, and I think would in October, November would take up the this registry. And I would through the chair, I would be happy to suggest to the commission that Beth, you mentioned a convening role. Were you thinking a general discussion around the needs of victims and survivors, or something more specific, like providing feedback on the registry proposal? If it's the latter, we could look for
doing the registry proposal. I think we'll keep that sort of separate because I know that really does not impact everyone, and maybe it does somewhat impact all of you, but not necessarily with your constituencies. But I would be really welcome to the larger conversation, right? So sort of where are the places where we can across disciplines, right? Where can we identify where some of these concerns are, and the ways in which we sort of are seeing things continue to sort of slide in a direction that feels like perhaps we're not going to get that ground back, right? Like I know a lot of things we're talking about COVID has made us lose ground. I think we've gone beyond the impacts of COVID to establishing a new status quo that we're not going to be able to pull back from easily. And so that's more the piece I want to think of it more universally. And certainly, Mark, I know Lucy's talked to you all, so we can talk more in particular around the sex offender registry, but I love the larger conversation, all the threads that we can pull together around victims and survivors.
I think you said that very well about the long-term impact of COVID. I do think it's changed huge pieces of our society, and they're for the good and maybe the better, but we're not, it's not going to be a singular issue that's going to go away. All right, so what I have is Beth's going to convene a small group. She's going to invite everybody to a smaller group, and you can let Jeannie know. She can set it out through through our email process here, and then whoever would like to be a part of that conversation, bringing something back, we'll put it on the agenda for the November meeting. However people, and what are any other forums like the Sentencing Commission that might be able to address that? Does that make sense to everybody? Is there anything that, so Beth, you are so emboldened to do this. Go ahead. And one of the things, when I was talking to Judge Baldini about this council, one of my, from the very beginning, when I first came out as council, probably, 10, 11 years ago, I saw the value of this collaboration. I saw who was at the table and the ability for us to talk to each other in one time in one place. So this is exactly what I think we're supposed to be doing, among other things. But I think this is really the opportunity. So let's pick our topics and see what we can manage to do. Otherwise, we'll be talking in different pieces and never really getting the ball rolling. So, all right. Anything else people want to talk about? Legislative proposals, COVID issues that are coming up? All right. Any new business? All right. I do have workshops coming up, my free workshops for women who've come through domestic violence, sexual assault. They're called My Avenging Angel Workshops, Living Well is Our Best Revenge. Coming up in October is the 21st anniversary of my niece's murder. She was killed by her ex-boyfriend on a college campus in 1999. So it's always a difficult month for me. So I try to do things like workshops and events that can show us that we will overcome some of these issues. And one of the things I was doing this morning was a radio show on Where We Live about the Gabby Petito case, because there's lots of issues that are coming up around that. Some of the same issues that my niece was 19 when she was killed, the same issues that she didn't catch all the warning signs, and there weren't people around who really were very helpful to her. So they're ongoing issues. So as we go into the month of October, let's see if we can do that. So if you know anybody who's interested in my workshops, it's helping women move on after abuse. I don't duplicate the services of the sexual assault crisis services or domestic violence, but really try to give another step. So those are available. I think Jeannie has sent around the flyer in the past. So is there any other new business? Okay. The other thing go ahead.
Susan, Andrew has his hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Andrew. Yes, I can see it.
Just an announcement and an opportunity for folks. I just sent the notice to Linda and team to get out to each of you. There's actually been established a new commission on gun violence intervention and prevention by the state legislature, and the aim here is to generate a report, recommendations to our lawmakers by December or January, in time for the 2022 legislative session. And so I think this is a great opportunity for folks that are involved with victim services, specifically in this group, ideally to be in a position to position ourselves to submit not only testimony, but also recommendations that this advisory team members should include in their plan. And so I get that information over to Linda and team that can get that out to folks. In fact, the first meeting is tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and I also included the Zoom link for that as well.
Great. Gina will get that around. The other thing, when I was on the radio show this morning, the other person on the show was Megan Scanlon, who's the new executive director of CCADV. So we met on the radio, which is what we do these days. And I invited her to come to one of our council meetings as she could and just introduce herself. Jerry Wild is the representative for CCADV and a very adequate and fabulous representation of CCAD, but I'd love to have Megan come on and just introduce herself and chat a bit. So I will see if she's available at one of our upcoming meetings. All right. So anything else we have on the agenda? Any other new business, any old business, anything we didn't cover? Any hands that were raised that I didn't see? See, by the time I do this for 2 hours, I actually know what I'm doing because I'm a Zoom person, so I could do a Zoom meeting in my sleep. But this is interesting. All right. So we have a meeting November the 9th. Jean also sent out the dates for our 2022. It's hard to believe we're in 2022 for next year. So. And I have been trying to remember this. We are scheduled to have 5 meetings a year by statute. We used to schedule 6 meetings so we could fudge one, but we're now only scheduling 5 meetings. So please put those on your calendar so that you have them. And thank you so much for coming. As Linda mentioned in the beginning, we've had great success with quorums. People wanting to come and share and bring your stuff here, bring some of your stuff here. So please continue to do that. And if you have any topics you'd like to put on the agenda, we do encourage members, if they want to do a presentation, 20 minutes or so would be great. People have come and done reports. The last one I remember was when Debbie came and talked about the project they were working on legal rights for through legal services. So think about that in terms of things you're working on. Once again, this is a very broad forum, very across many areas. So it's a great place to get information out. All right. Anything else? Thank you, Linda. How many more months do we have, Linda? We're counting down here. Do we have a retirement clock going or anything?
No. It's really nice to see everybody. I'm going to end it, Susan, because I don't want to go there.
All right. Well, we have lots of time to do that. No problem. All right. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the new members. And we'll see you guys, all of you, in November. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.